Hello everyone, JavaMentor.net here. In today's video, let's learn how Java handle date and time. So, first of all, I want to introduce you to some old API that Java exposed regarding date and time. We can create date and time in this fashion. So we want to create new date and then we pass some number. And this number is number of milliseconds that passed from the January 1st of 1970. And here on this website, you can convert time to number and vice versa. So, for example, if you want to say convert milliseconds 0, that is the January 1st, 1970. This is the current time, Unix time, UTC time, so this is UTC time zone. But for example, if you type here a year and then some month, some day, this is the number of milliseconds that passed from this date and time to this date. Okay, that is how you create date and time in Java. So you need to specify how many milliseconds passed from this date. Now that is the old API. And if we take a look here, if we create one date, we can mutate that date and we can set new date. So basically this was one date, as you can see here. So this was July 8, 2024, so 2 hours ago. But then we can set time to 0 and then this date represents 50 years ago, right? Which means that this date is mutable, which means that you will have trouble with this date if you're using multi-threading. So that's one problem. Multi-threading is a headache with this date. Of course, if you have date in string format, you can convert your date from date to string or from string to date using this simple date format. So for example, you create formatter in this fashion and you say, I want to convert this date into string, and that string I want to have it in this format. Of course, you can include time here as well, something like this. And you can just Google how to use this simple date format and just include time as well, because in this fashion we are extracting only date. Okay, that's regarding date. There is one more class which is called calendar in the old Java. By old Java, I mean Java's before Java 8. Then in Java 8, new date time API is introduced in Java. And that new API I can show you using this Bildung article. This Bildung is a very good website for beginners. You can find many beginner-friendly tutorials here. So basically, first of all, they're mentioning few issues with existing with old API, thread safety, I mentioned that. API design was poor, so many things that you can do now with new API you were unable to do with the previous API, but you were forced to do that manually. And also time zone handling was not that easy in the old API. New Java API consists of many classes, so let's start with those three. First of all, local date. So you can create current local date without time in this fashion, or you can create any other date in this fashion, or you can parse string to the local date in this fashion. Now, of course, there are plenty of utility methods. For example, you can go current day and then plus days 1, that is basically you have tomorrow, or for example minus 1 month and then you have today minus 1 month, so it's 30 days in the past or 31. There are plenty of easy methods like for example you take this string, then you parse that string to local date, and then you want to see if that is Monday or Sunday or whatever it is. For example, this wasn't possible with the old API, so they improved API with those new classes. plenty of other methods. For example, is it a leap year or it's not? Of course, you can compare dates, so you can say, is one date before another, is one date after another, and so on and so on. So that was local date, working with date in local time zone. So take a note, okay, we are working with dates, but there is no mention of time zone here. When you're working with time, you can also work without time zone with this local time class. And methods are pretty similar. So you can parse some time, you can create in many other fashions. So this is converting from string, this is using a factory method on local time. You can also say this time plus 1 hour minus 1 minute, something like that. You can get hour, get minute, get second from that local time. You can check out those methods. There are plenty of them and they're pretty straightforward. You can compare times, like is this time before this one or after this time, blah 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 blah. Okay, that's regarding time, very straightforward. Now we have one class that has both date and time. So when you're creating an object of this local date time, you want to say, let's say it's this day of February in 2015 and it's 6:30 in the morning. Or you can do like this if you're parsing from string. This t is separator for on the left side is date, on the right side it's time. And again, you have plus days, minus hours, and so on and so on. Similar methods like previously. But still, it's very important to realize that both on local time and on local date time, there are still no time zones. And time zones are really a big headache. Even if you're working with the new API, you need to be very, very careful with those time zones. For example, if your application is deployed in USA and you do something like this, you will get time which is local to America, right? But if your users are in Europe and you return them local time, well, then that will be of wrong data, right? You need to convert your local time to their time zone, which means you really need to be careful with those time zones. Okay, the next topic is how to handle those zone things. There is one zones date time class. So basically you can say I want to create date time for this particular time zone. This is the way how to see all available time zones. But okay, you want to create zones date time. So you want to create an object which has date time and zone info, time zone info. So you're passing local date time and you are passing in which zone you want date time to be. Now, of course, you can parse from string in this fashion. And here is the way how to convert one zoned date time. So in this example, you have one zoned date time in UTC time zone, and then you want to convert that to Europe Zurich time zone. So this is how you can do that. This name of this Stack Overflow question is convert zoned date time to local date time at time zone. And this is the code. Okay, let's continue. Then the last two things that are important are period and duration. So period is used for dates. So for example, if you have local date, some date, and then you want to say, hey, please can you add 5 days, period of 5 days, and then you can get some local date. This final date is 5 days after this initial date, right? You can say, okay, how many days are between this date and this date? And the result is 5. You can say how many months are between those two dates, how many years are between those two dates. The same thing, but with time. So for example, if you want to say how many minutes here is between those two instances of local time, for that you use duration. So For example, you create one local time and then you can say that time plus 30 seconds, that is some another time. Or you can say how many seconds are between this and this time. Or you can say how many seconds is between this and this time. So the same thing, just in two different shapes. And of course, the last thing is how to convert from old to new API. So basically, if you have date from the old API, yeah, it's very important to mention that all of those classes, period, duration, date, sorry, not date, local time, local date time, all of them are immutable. So you don't have problem with thread safety, and also there are plenty of new utility methods, so you don't have to do things manually. You have how to convert from date to local date time, and at the end you have a little bit of how to convert from one format to another format. So let's say that you want to convert this local date time to ISO date, then this date time formatter is your best friend. Or you can use some pattern. So again, you want to convert your local date time to some string, but in this format, this is how you would do it. And that's basically everything regarding old Java datetime API and new datetime API. New API is available from Java 8, and that's basically it.